Hey, in this video, I'm going to go through Giraffe as a tool for consultants to accelerate some of the work that they do. I'm really breaking it down. This is for architects and urban designers mainly, but also for people that do feasibility studies into these steps. So the first is gathering contextual data. This is either done with in-house GIS tools, government portals, and you layer up that contextual data, whether it's flood, zoning, demographics, normally in something like CAD, Illustrator, GIS, and then it goes into a report generally compiled in InDesign. The second main job is doing design options, so responding to that contextual data. Designing is generally done in CAD, SketchUp, Illustrator, maybe Revit, ArchiCAD, Rhino, in combination with Excel, because it's really about doing the master plan or doing the design and then getting the numbers. So this has got 40,000 views, how to make a beautiful master plan in Photoshop. Which brings us to step 3, which is the meat of it. The analysis and the creative work that's been done in step 1 and 2 gets tested in front of the client or the client representation in meetings. And the reason people spend so much time working on this stuff is so that those meetings go well, so that the client understands what you're trying to convey, the reasons for the decisions you've made, what those decisions in fact are, unambiguously, clearly, so you get high quality feedback so that you actually accelerate in how you deliver this thing. And then after that, after the preferred option has been found, because you option, you change, you draw, the road this way, that way, the next way. Finally, you find an option that's working with the site, the numbers are working, all of that sort of stuff. You bake it in and you do this beautiful report, generally Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign. At this point, you may also be commissioning renderings, fly-throughs, graphics, even websites, depending on your budget. But this is expensive to do and normally done by specialists. So you can see the gamut of tools that is used, everything from government portals and GIS through CAD, 3D software, InDesign, PowerPoints, and then into things like Maya or 3ds Max, to do the actual renderings. Now, Giraffe is not the best tool at everything, but what it does is in step 1 and 2, and even 3, it does really, really well. And then it plays actually as well in the final output. So let's just go through this at a really mechanical level, really basic level. Okay, so here's Giraffe, right? And so I've got a point that says hey, so I will delete it. Now that first step was finding contextual data. So what we can do at Giraffe is I can just add some layers, and I'm just going to do it from a template project because I have that, and I'm going to add those to the current project and say done. And you can see that immediately that work's done, right? So I've added in contextual data. Now it's all on at once, which is not what you want. So let's choose a site for argument's sake. Now I need to find where it's got to be somewhere here. Okay, let's say this is our site over here. I can fade the cadastre in, and the land zoning's on. So I may say, look, let's turn land zoning on a little bit and maybe just bump that cadastre over so slightly. I may say, hey, I want to fade in the satellite imagery just behind, or in this case, I'll actually use the New South Wales imagery because it's of higher quality. But I actually don't want to. I like this as a graphic. So I'm going to save this project. And I'm going to call it graphic template, and I'll show you why in a second. All right, and I'm just going to go to that project. Okay. All right, so I lose a bit of the grouping data that I so dearly loved, but that doesn't matter. So what did I say? I said cadastre. I'm going to bring that to the front. I'm going to fade those 3D buildings back, and I'm going to turn that land zoning on again. Now I can go all the way, or I can fade it back. I have that graphical control. And now in vistas, I'm going to create a vista, and this is going to be what I'm exporting to, right? And this is going to be zoning, and that is the first image that I'm going to put in my report, right? And then I'm going to turn zoning. I'm going to turn hide a building on. Vistas, I'm going to go new vista. Now notice I haven't moved the screen, and I'm going to call that hide a building. Save. And so when I'm doing this, nothing moves, right? You can see the camera doesn't move, just the layers move. Now, if I'm, moving the camera around and then changing these views, I'm not going to get a solid export of the same picture. And also notice if I resize my browser window or if I change the screen I'm working on, when I click export, it's going to export a different sized view. And so if you're taking this stuff into Illustrator or InDesign, it's going to cause chaos. So try not to. But that first job of layering up data, I have nailed, right, in literally in minutes. Okay, so now often once you've laid up the data, so imagine you could go through the floor space ratio, and we obviously have tens of thousands of layers that we could add, right, for you to say to your client, hey, we know what we're talking about with this little site over here between Clifton and Euroka Street. So often what happens now is diagrams. Okay, so what that is are just graphical marks on the map that represent principles. So we ship with a few of them. So I'm going to do this line with a label. I'm going to draw that. And that is the arrow that ships with Giraffe, which is not entirely appropriate for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the stroke dash pattern. So I can kind of go mad here, really. I think you can sort of import patterns of arbitrary complexity. Very, very similar to Illustrator here, or any SVG kind of vector editor. So dash your line width, I can change it up, I can change it down. I can add properties around the arrow length. So I can make this one real big or real small. I'm just going to delete it, so I go back to default. I can obviously change the color, right? Make that a bit deeper red so it stands out, but I can really do anything, yeah? And here I can also, I can add some markers. So I may say, now this is again what ships with Giraffe. So I'm going to open the editor. I'm going to call this marker key site. I'm going to bold that. I'm going to make the text white. I'm going to save it. I'm going to turn the background color to black. I'm going to shrink the stick height to 0. And I'm going to scale it down slightly. And again, now notice, like if I zoom all the way out, that label stays small. That's a decision we've made. We could have the label grow as you zoom out, but what we've done is we've made it very context dependent. So, if you zoom, it actually does max out in its size, which is actually amazing. Well done, guys. So it sort of finds its size. So I can actually shrink it a little bit for that. Now, I will just navigate back to that vista, so I'm always working within that vista. And this vista is going to define my output. So once we translate from Giraffe to Paperspace, we have this, we know the kind of the size and scale of what we're working with. Now, frequently we do things like have numbers as well. So very similar with if I do that, I hit Command B to bold it, or Control B, I make it white. I love this white on black approach, white text, black background. There you go. I'll make it a stick height of 0, and I'll just turn that border down to 0 as well. So now I've got this little number, and I can make that one, say number 2, etc. Right? And so when I export this thing out to my report making software, I'm getting these this information. So I'm actually gonna fade that right back. I'm gonna turn the that's a terrible image. Geez, that is shocking. Oh, there, it's not too bad. I'm actually just going to keep it like this very simple background, black, the cadaster and the grey background. Now, of course, notice that we can change this as well. So I can change the map background to something like this, or I could say, I could just make it blank, pure white. Right, and then I get this real nice clean look, right? So it's like a blank sheet of paper, which is also cool. So I'm trying to show you that your expressive power here with Giraffe is high. You can express a lot of things graphically. One thing again worth noticing is this region with a label. So say I want to sort of highlight this site even more. Right, I can do something like that. And let me highlight it like a nice sort of red. I'll make the line around it black, and I'll make it a bit wider and call that 2.2. There we go, that's a region. Now, I've got this thing here. Okay, now you can see that's too solid. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to add a property called fill opacity. And I'm just going to crank the opacity of this region down just to 3%. So there the internal fill opacity is cranked down, but the region itself, the outline, is still at max capacity. And notice again with Giraffe, it's just, it's this vector editor. We can sort of get in as tightly as we want. Often when I'm doing this, you're just making a point here rather than trying to get things precise. But if you like things precise, get in there. Okay. I mean, this is cool, right? So, so this could be like item number 1, through site link from Ancram Lane into Clifton Street. I can put this key site over here. Then I might say, key thing number 2 is this, maybe this is this yellow site is key. And then I'm going to make a point about 3, right? That is not a bad little diagram. That will not cause anyone any shame if you present that to a client. That is clear and graphical and quick. Now, if we want to turn on 3D buildings or buildings, we can. And this is the next cool thing about Giraffe, is that once you start designing, you just start, right? So I'm going to say, look, we're going to put a park over here. And it's going to be landscape. And then I am going to put a building over here. I'm going to front it with retail, 15 meters deep. So look, the dimensions of all that. Look, the shadow pops in. Look, how nice is that? Now, before I actually get ahead of myself, what I'm going to do is I am going to create a new layer down here with this button called annotation. I'm going to create it, and I'm just going to move this stuff onto the annotation layer, and I'm going to turn the annotation layer off. And so all this annotation, I'm shift clicking over here, is just going to go onto annotation, and this is going to go onto annotation, and this little guy is going to go onto annotation. Okay, so now I've got like my actual model, and I've got the annotation. There's the shadow. So again, often when you're drawing these site plans, people like the shadows because they're so cool, because they pop up. So let's just keep going with this. So now that was silly. I just posted that because my active layer was annotation. I pasted this retail onto annotation, so I'm going to pop it back onto default, and I'm just going to set default to the active layer, so all geometries will be built on default. Now notice I could lock the annotation layer to leave it on, but not be able to select it. Often useful, or I can just keep it. I can keep it off. Okay, so let's just do this. And pull this something like this, and I'm going to make this residential. There we go. And then I'm going to make another little parklet over here, and then I'm going to make another tower. Notice I'm just copy pasting so everything stays aligned. All right, and now I actually have to do something north here just to show you something a bit better, a bit more as well. So you see that tower's gone under the podium. So if I crank that to a higher stack order, how good is that? And you can see the shadow is communicating to the user that this bit's higher. So what we can actually do to get that shadow in a better position for us is just reposition the sun and get it where we want it. Okay, and so now let me just quickly draw one more thing, a simple residential building over here. Actually, let's just say we're going to do something like that. Okay, here's our scheme. So look, I'm imagining these annotations. I'm not, making everything sing together. Because the next thing you need to do, if we come back to our thing, so we're doing options at the moment. We've done CAD, SketchUp, Illustrator. That's sort of what this is. This is somewhere between CAD, somewhere between SketchUp and Illustrator, but it's not Excel. We've got to show the numbers here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add I'm going to add the precinct app, which is just going to, do some numbers for us and show you those numbers. Okay, so what precinct needs is we need to divide this big site into 2 subsites. So I'm going to create a new layer here called sub precincts. And I don't know if I spelled that right, but there we go. Sub precincts, it's active, and I'm just going to draw 2. Right, boom, 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 and I'm going to give them a color. So this precinct I'm going to make orange. And then I'm going to copy this precinct. I'm just going to stretch it up like that, and then stretch that guy to here. All right, I'm going to make this guy yellow. Okay, then I can crank back precincts, and I can also lock it. Okay, and now in the precincts app, I can add a scenario. The geometry layer is going to be default, and the lots layer is going to be sub precincts. And now you'll see it says nil nil, nil nil. It's because I did not give those precincts a number. So there's 2 things I can do. I can either select sub precincts, unlock it, and then, or I can just click on it directly and add this property here. And I need to add this lot number property. Call that top one lot number 1, and I'm going to call this this one again that special lot number, camel case, so lowercase lot, capital N instead of a space, number, and call this guy 2. There we go. And then you can see the color, yellow and orange, the lot area, the residential GFA, the retail GFA, the landscape area, the building coverage, the open space, the ratios, and the FSRs. So very, very cool, very, very rich. And if you need more data, just tell me. Okay, now look, I can also open this in this new window, so I can just have it here. Right, so this is just epic, and you can obviously export this, but this is a nice, clear table of key areas that grows with you, right? And it's just live. Fantastic for a meeting. Super clear, super obvious what's going on. 3D, navigate, really, really cool, really powerful. Turn on the annotations, look at them, explain them. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you that back of these 3 jobs, right? So the GIS, we've done. We've layered it up. We didn't have to copy and paste it. We didn't have to rescale it. We didn't have to reference it. Just comes. Then those design options, CAD, SketchUp, these happen here. This is a place to do design options. That's really where Giraffe was born. What we love to do is design and talk and think about how cities can come together. And that's why we built this product. We can round corners. We can even round corners because we think that makes things look nicer. And then, of course, Excel is happening here, right? So all these numbers are happening. So finally, that export into InDesign you can do, but this meetings thing actually happens really nicely in Giraffe. This is an acceptable thing to take to a meeting. This is a very acceptable thing to take into a meeting, and just have this on the screen and talk to it. And if someone says, well, can we move that around? You can say, yeah. Or if someone says, what if we add the level? You can just show them. And all the areas, all the numbers are live. So this is not, we've worked really hard to make sure that the graphical quality of this is not embarrassing, right? So you can take this to a meeting, which is going to make finding that preferred option, winning that client's trust, exploring all the options, making sure that people feel that everyone's been heard, every issue has been responded to. This is a very powerful tool for doing this. Now, I'm going to show you one more thing, and then that will be the end of this tutorial, right? I'm just going to show you how, from a graphic perspective, we can change the colors as well, just because that's going to be important. So the first thing I'm going to do, actually, is I'm going to run the context. I'm not going to run the context app. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring some context in. So I'm going to turn on the 3D buildings surrounding us, and I'm just going to create that one and create this one. So we're working on bulk create, and you can see why, because this certainly is tedious, but it simply must happen. The shadows that these context buildings create only happen for geometries that have been brought into Giraffe or else, you know, the shadows would have to be generated for all of this, and it's just too much. It's too computationally expensive, even in the era of the M2 Apple. Okay, so if I turn off those 3D buildings, you can see all those geometries that I've created. And like an absolute legend, I've created them on the sub-precinct layer. I'm going to create a new giraffe layer called context. And I'm going to unlock sub-precincts. I'm just going to move this stuff onto that context layer. So I'm just box selecting to do that. No, I don't want that site. So I'll put that onto context. I'll actually delete that little guy, and I'll put those two onto context. Okay. Now I can lock sub precincts again, safely, safe and sound. Turn off default. Select all of this stuff. I'm just going to hoist this because there's a height, right? Okay, which gives it a height. Now, there's something a little screwy with these geometries, which is very interesting. So those have come in corrupted, but so be it. We can delete them. Okay, so I may actually just manually do this. And so look, whenever you come into this problem, like Giraffe, it just always gives you an escape hatch. You just get out of there, right? And I think these are... don't think they're actually just context. So you can always kind of get out of there. So I'm calling these context. And I've got to do the same over all of these guys. Call them context. Okay. Let me delete that one just because. Okay, and so you can see the context there, and if I turn default on, it's there too. Notice you can go transparent. All right, and now this context is not giving me quite enough shadow, so I'm just going to get a bit more, and I'm just changing the time of day. Okay, that I'm sort of happy with. Well, that kind of 45-degree shadow. There we go. Let me just add a few levels to some of this context. Add some height rather. So height is the dominating factor over here rather than levels. So let's just make this, which again allows you to change the way that the stuff appears. Okay, so now I want like a more washed out look. So I'm just gonna fade that color back, right? I'm gonna fade it even more back. Save, a bit more. Then I'm going to do, what I'm actually going to do is make all my buildings this color. So even the retail, which is currently blue, I'm going to make it that color by just copy pasting that hex. Then you can see the context sort of over there. So I'm just going to jump into context, and I'm going to just make the line weight, the line width 0, so that they just don't have this outline. Okay, there you go. So you can see, I actually don't like that, so I'll make it very, very thin. Okay, maybe you have to have one at least. Okay, so I have it a little bit, but it's very faint. And I may make my buildings have slightly more line width, so maybe 2, but I'll fade it back so it's like a grey. I'm not heaps happy with that, but I think really the point here is that you can kind of do what you want to. And so if you've got the graphical chops, which I don't fully have, as you can no doubt tell, you can really make this stuff start to sing. Okay, so you can see all of that, and like, yeah, you may say, look, I don't need the land zoning for this, and this like horrific sub precinct looks terrible, and this landscape should be something, you know, a much softer green, right? All of this can be done, and can be input. And of course, we have things like trees that allow you to pop in some trees, which even cast shadow. Okay, so hopefully you can see here that the graphic range is relatively powerful. Now, what's really cool about this is that if we have to do a new project, I can draw this boundary and save project over here, which is just one over, and I can go to it, and if I bring stuff in from the design library, so I call this graphic template, which I just created, and I can just bring it all in. So maybe I'll bring the default layer in, because I don't really care about the annotations, although if I wanted them I could, or the sub precincts, I just add them. I replace that metadata on landscape, simple, residential, and retail. Even if I draw new retail or new residential, you can see all that graphic standard has come with me. So that graphic work that I did has flowed through now, and now all my master plans, 39 Ancram Street, as well as the old one, are to the new graphic standard, which is really cool. And if I want to bring in some annotations, I can go to the annotation layer, grab that, and add those, and there they are, And so you may, instead of setting them up as an actual project, you may set them up in a grid or something like that, and then your users are able to do this stuff in a really awesome way. So hopefully that shows you, some of these steps, how they can be powerfully done, and how they can actually be rolled out to the organization. And then the final thing really on the beautiful report is you just export it. You just export this thing, to go to the rendering folks. You want STL meshes. If you need Excel, you can export to Excel. And that's how it works. So you go into the specialist software for that, that final report. But by that point, the design's really locked in.